What's up? In this video, we're going to be talking about the modern relationship, specifically how the standard relationship model has degraded over time, going from dating for the purpose of getting married to what we have now being one-night stands, drunken hookups, open relationships, polyamory, and basically everything else in between. How we as a society need to return to tradition, and how all this nonsense started with the sexual revolution and birth control. Let's throw a little bit of over-editing in there and make it a bit more dramatic. Birth control. Now, for all of human history, there has been certain factors that have regulated our behavior and prevented us from doing cringe and degenerate things. These primary factors being what the culture and religion deems to be cringe and degenerate, and the societal consequences for violating that standard, which historically speaking would have been being ostracized and maybe even jail. And then there's also the consequences of those actions that you deal with personally, like harm to your personal well-being. Now, when it comes to sexual degeneracy, those consequences for all of human history were incredibly damning. You have sex outside of marriage, aka you post cringe, you get banned from the Minecraft server, metaphorically speaking. And you had to deal with the personal consequences of pregnancy and disease. But all of a sudden in the 1950s, some scientist dudes synthesized some hormones to create the birth control pill. They were trying to do science and make something new, first mistake, but they invented this hormone pill, which basically became widely available to married women after the Supreme Court case of Griswold v. Connecticut in the mid-1960s, and then to non-married women in 1972. Now, for the first time in human history, people had a reliable way of preventing pregnancy that wasn't sheep intestine, which everyone was pretty stoked about. Finally, women were freed from the oppressive realities of a functioning reproductive system, allowing everyone to participate in a sterilized version of the Life Creating Act without consequences. Or so they thought. Funny thing happened though with the success of birth control, where people weren't getting pregnant, but instead they were getting AIDS. You win some, you lose some. Now, with the risk of out-of-wedlock pregnancy basically nullified by birth control, with it, over time went the stigma of premarital sex. In the past, if an unmarried couple had sex and then got pregnant, which is, historically how those things typically went, fear of being deemed cringe would have basically forced them to get married and then raise the kid, aka take responsibility for their actions. But women, of course, were no longer getting pregnant because they were using hormones to sterilize themselves. And because of the sterilization of the Life Creating Act and pregnancy no longer being a logical consequence with it, we began to lose the morality associated with the act. What used to be something that created life and chemically bonded a couple became a recreational activity that you could do with anyone and everyone consequence-free, except for the AIDS, and the syphilis, and the depression, and the destroying of your ability to pair bond. But from this ability to have sex pregnancy-free, we get the idea of casual sex, and out of that, hookup culture. That it's just a thing that people do, like jogging or rock climbing, which is funny because last time I checked, you couldn't just go rock climbing and then end up pregnant. Well, maybe, but now sex is simply just a victim-free, harmless activity with some manageable risks, right? Well, funny enough, one of those risks is being managed a lot more effectively than the other. But the pill, by sterilizing sex, removed the joint consequences of pregnancy and has left us with the individual consequences of disease and depression. And since people aren't really waiting until marriage anymore, there's really nothing forcing them to stay with any one person, which allows them to rack up a body count like a 14-year-old who plays too much Call of Duty and catch them all like Ash Ketchum. Here lies the modern relationship, assisted by dating apps like Tinder, which is basically Angry Birds except for adults. Don't think too deeply into that metaphor. People are now free to hook up with as many strangers as they so please. And we've moved so far from the standard of waiting until marriage that waiting a mere 3 dates is now considered old-fashioned. 3 dates? I'll tell you what, Chief, anything that you can get after 3 trips to Denny's is something not worth getting. People have become so used to hooking up with strangers they've just met that taking things slowly is now dating advice, as if not having sex on the first date is now somehow a revolutionary concept. But that's how far the norm has shifted. Everyone's a coomer, obviously. 1 in 5 adults have an STI on any given day, which is roughly equivalent of rolling an individual dice or die, whatever it's called. Except one of those sides means someone has an STI. Also, one of the sides just isn't there. Just pretend that makes sense. People aren't really getting married anymore. And when they do, they're not staying together. Everyone's racking up premarital body counts, which is, of course, damaging their ability to have successful relationships in the future. And they're still participating in sexual relationships even when they're too emotionally mature to call it a relationship. So instead, they just call it friends with benefits, an idea that's been pushed pretty heavily through Hollywood, along with all other kinds of degeneracy. So here we are, 60 years after the sexual revolution and birth control, enjoying our liberation as a bunch of numb, sad, lonely losers with rampant pornography and a culture so overly sexualized that songs like WAP can easily top the music charts. With failing marriages and relationships, a society full of adults who are emotionally effectively children, playing games on their phones with other adults who are also effectively children. And just like children, when you take away their toys, they throw a temper tantrum. Last year in the UK, they experienced a shortage of contraceptives, which caused utter chaos. Really, you can't go without having promiscuous sex for a week. No, they can't, because they are controlled by their vices. And that's what the sexual revolution did to us. We are no longer slaves to natural biological processes or overbearing restrictive culture. No, now we're all slaves to our vices. Addicted to promiscuity, addicted to porn, addicted to our own self-destruction. So the question is, do you feel liberated? No, you don't. So, how do we return to tradition? I got an idea for you. Kind of a hot take though. What if you just stopped having sex with people you don't want to have kids with? You know, the thing that chemically bonds you to another person and then also, makes babies? What if you just didn't do that until you were committed to a person via marriage? See, humans are naturally monogamous creatures, except for when we destroy our ability to be monogamous with promiscuity. What's really funny is, the divorce rate for regular marriages in the United States is 40 to 50%. For arranged marriages, it's only 4%. Am I saying we should go back to arranged marriages? No. Technically speaking, it would be trad, but that's not the point. Maybe you should just pick a person and then stick with that person instead of playing the field or whatever the degenerates call it. Maybe don't take advice from degenerates. Oh, but don't you know casual sex is useful and important? No. Stop treating this like a game, because if you're a woman, that's a fantastic way to end up childless and alone at 40. And if you're a man, that's just a great way to become a perpetual coon brain that complains that all women are degenerate sluts, while he himself is a degenerate slut, bragging about his leg count in online forums. Nobody cares about your high score, bro. This isn't Galaga. Nobody thinks you're cool. You just look like a coomer who's wasting all of his time and energy on women. Getting with a bunch of chicks is not going to make you happy and fulfilled. You know what is, though? Saving the West. Reject birth control, reject contraceptives, no nut till marriage, they get married, have a bunch of kids, save the West. It's that simple. Your oxytocin's running low, you feel so far away from home, playing games on your phone. You're stuck in the fray of making one mistake a day, like a child in dismay, aka a coon brain. And I thought I told you last time, this is such a wasteful pastime, but you must have missed the point. So now you're running from the downside. Was it even worth the upside? Feeling everything but joy. Your serotonin's running out, and you're filling up with doubt, looking for a way out. But is it too late? Or could you even change today? Maybe for tomorrow.